Good morning.
Okay, thank you. Right then, meeting of the local pension board. First item on the agenda is election of chair. Please can I take a proposer or any nominees? Thank you.
Propose Dennis for chair.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder for that?
And I second Dennis as chair.
Thank you, Barry. All in favour? Take that as unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Dennis Payne is now elected chair for the municipal year.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your faith in me for the next year. I'd like to begin the meeting by welcoming members and officers and those members of the press and public who are watching live stream of this meeting via the council's website. The next step I would like to do is to invite nominations for the vice chair of the committee.
And I'd like to nominate Barry for vice chair.
Thank you, and I would like to second that. Are there any other nominations? Those in favour? Thank you, Barry. I take it that you are elected as vice chair for the rest of the year.
I'd just like to say thank you to members of the board.
The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings. Can I also ask, please, that everyone present turn their mobile phones to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place, and I will. There is no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will make our way downstairs by the nearest available fire exit, which is through the middle doors on my left, and the muster point is in the car park to the rear of the meeting. So, Daniel, may I take apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Simon King.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest on matters on the agenda? I will take that as a no. So then I would like to turn to the minutes of the meeting on the 30th. We're being asked to approve the minutes as a correct record. I was absent at the time, so cannot comment on them. Are there any questions on those minutes? I will take that as a no. So on that basis, I will take the recommendation to approve the minutes as carried. There has also an updated action log. Does anybody have any questions on that action log? You'll note particularly, if I may, that we've had a response from Access on our request for the continued attendance and involvement in that. And there is a planned formal review due in March of next year. I believe you also had a copy of the letter I received in response to that. Yes, okay. Are there any questions on the action log? Right, so no members have indicated that they wish to speak, so we'll take the action log also as noted. We'll now move on to the internal audit report. We have members of the West Northamptonshire audit team virtual on to present this report. Over to you.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. I'm presenting the report for internal audit on behalf of my manager, Scott Peaslin, who's got COVID at the moment. So it's only one of us here today. Chair, if I can go into the report, I don't intend to go into any detail. We've completed the work for the 22-23 review, and I'm pleased to say for the adequacy of the system design, we've given it substantial assurance, and for compliance with the controls, substantial assurance as well. Could just point out, Chair, this year we took a different approach, moving away from the historic volume-based transactional testing to more interaction with management. And the details of this approach are detailed on pages 2, the bottom of page 2, and up to the middle of page 3. And this approach enabled us to provide the assurance levels that we have. Again, moving away, this year we made no recommendations in the report because we found our findings were already being actioned by management. And I mean, one of the examples is the continuing development of the KPIs by the pensions team. Other than that, we also followed up the prior year recommendations. And there's just one outstanding from the prior year, which has been the full implementation date has now been moved to December 2023. And that's largely due to the fact that new workflow processes have been introduced in year to deal with these reconciliations in a more timely manner. Chair, I don't intend to go into the details of the report. I'm prepared to take any questions and provide any answers that I'm able to at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Well.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I was very interested to hear about your new approach. I'd just like to ask a general question for Mark and from internal audit point of view. How did you both feel that actually this went? Was this an improvement on previous years, this new approach? First of all, probably Mark could make a comment on that.
I think you need to probably look
at it in the context of if you like, the journey in terms of the audit. We used to have way more transactional auditing. This time it was very much around the control processes. We did it with a view on what would we do in the future, and we thought we would be doing some more assurance work. But in terms of the approach, we're actually there's been a decision to actually rotate the internal auditors. So it's going to be West Northamptonshire 1 year, followed by Cambridgeshire. And so the discussions we've had with Cambridgeshire is they want to go back to a more transactional based audit. I think equally, I believe that the internal audit, for example, at Cambridgeshire County Council, wanted a more transactional based audit as well. So I think this went well. It went quicker than I expected, to be quite honest. But I think we did an incredibly robust audit the year before with transactional and assurance work as well. And this was always intended to build on that assurance work. So that's probably my views on it.
What about internal audit's views?
Through you, Chair. I said, as Mark said, it was completed in less time than he expected. In fact, the number of days was significantly reduced because we reduced the volume of testing. And from that point of view, I think it went, and in particular, taking up less officers' time as well. It's a new process, but I think it also enables us to look at the different areas which we've developed from the prior year, where we agreed, Chair, to add 3 new control objectives: the key performance indicators, the procedures to identify and report breaches, and the risk strategies. And I think those are the more, at this point in time, in my opinion, and the opinion in the audit, is that these are the areas that are being really developed to strengthen the whole control environment. And certainly, I'm sure Michelle will give you an update on those specific areas later on in the meeting. But I think the focus, from our point of view this year, has rightly shifted to the higher level controls and the reduction in the volume-based transactional testing, which is a historic approach. And for recent years, that detailed testing and voluminous testing hasn't really thrown up any significant control areas. So from that point of view, Chair, I think it's been quite a positive move forward. But again, if I might add, we've been in contact already with the Cambridgeshire auditors and provided all our working papers for this year and the prior year where more volumes were tested. And we're in regular contact with them as and when required to discuss. Obviously, their approach, we've got nothing to do with the approach they're going to approach. But the initial, as Mark said, I think their initial approach would be go back to more volume and transactional-based testing. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask another question, please?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to ask, I've got several questions to ask actually, and I suppose really where I'm coming from here, probably too many detailed questions to actually ask in respect of this meeting. I just wonder if we could have a very short, maybe half an hour meeting at some point in the future, and I'll just write down the queries I've got. Would that be acceptable?
Chair, as we did last year, we're quite happy to do that, yes. And if you can arrange it, maybe sometime next week. If you can wait, what I'll do, I'll arrange, Chair, to contact the member when my manager is back, has recovered from COVID, so we can, all 3 of us. And we were expecting a new head of audit coming in on the 13th. I don't know.
I didn't catch that. Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
We've got a new head of audit starting on the 13th of November. I don't know if his presence would add anything to your questions. Around, so we could consider that the timing of when you'd like to meet us. But we've got no problems with meeting you to discuss your questions. Might help if we could have the list, please, beforehand.
Yeah.
I think we did the same approach last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with that if the board is good with that.
And that sounds like a sensible way forward for your detailed questions. So yes, let's go with that. Councillor Seif.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Sort of general question, really, and it really follows from our Lim's point about the process of the audit. I'm very struck by the change in the number of members and the value of the assets, and particularly the fall in the number of active employers, falling by 150. And I just wondered whether that has had any impact on the audit itself, because presumably, looking at just that broad statistic, it was the smaller employers that have dropped out or are no longer active. It should have made audit a little bit easier, I suppose, because they may have been the ones with the problems. I don't know. But I just wonder whether those numbers impacted on the process of the audit itself. It's quite stark, the fall in the number of active employers.
Chair, can I answer? Yeah, to be honest, I don't think we actually consider the number of active employees. We didn't go to that. We just selected from the transactions randomly. There was no. We didn't focus the audit on looking at the number of active. Obviously, the active employees would lead the number of members, and so we selected our samples based on the transactions in that area, depending on the number of members' transactions in the relevant area.
I think one of the drivers for the changes in active employers has been the academisation and the aggregation into multi-academy trusts. So it's not. I mean, it has made our life easier in the sense that we're dealing with less contact points. But that's been in terms of a logical explanation, that is certainly been what's been happening within the sector.
Thank you, Mark. I too had been mildly curious about a smaller number of employers, but rather more employees. Noting that Val has some detailed questions to ask at a separate session, I assume that we are to note the. You have a question?
I just wanted to sort of say well done, getting substantial ratings.
Thank you, Barry. I had written that down to say, and also no recommendations. I'd like to congratulate the team for achieving that. And I will take the internal audit report as noted. Thank you very much for coming along.
Thank you very much. Permission to leave, Chair?
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you. Good morning to you all. Thank you very much.
Right. Item 4 is the administration report. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. So yes, in the usual format, I will run through the administration report and just pick out the key details from the report. So there's 3 areas really I just wanted to make an additional comment about. So firstly is around the key performance indicators. Obviously in this report, over the 4-month period, we have seen some red and amber KPIs for the processes that surround retirement from active service and for retirements from deferred membership. Obviously, the details in the report regarding some of the administration issues surrounding that. But I just wanted to make a comment in addition about an additional pressure that we've seen and that we're trying to address as well. So part of the administration strategy review has been looking at our KPI targets. So the intention is to bring the administration strategy to you in January for a pre-scrutiny review. And the issue is with the 5-day turnaround with the retirement from active service. So effectively at the moment, that 5-day turnaround is particularly tight, and we've sense checked that against industry standards as well that confirm that to be the case. And what's happening is because of that tight target, It's putting real pressure on the team in that one particular area, and it's also then lending some undesirable behaviours, especially if there's any kind of errors that need correcting. There's not the time for that to follow the correct process to go back to the individual in terms of for their training and development. So some of the checkers are obviously quickly making the changes to be able to meet that KPI. So what the intention is at the moment is to, in December, ask the committee to temporarily relax that KPI to 10 days to give some flexibility there, with the follow-up then in March, following your review of the admin strategy, to formally put that into the March cycle, so that will be a standard KPI target of 10 days. In terms of the KPI development, obviously we've been bringing to you for the last few meetings our intentions to develop the supplementary KPIs as part of the customer journey. Appendix B contains the details of where we are so far with that. So for that journey, we're on target to produce some initial figures to the pension committee for December. Just as an additional comment to that, what we're looking to do is obviously we'll have our high level statistics at that point in time on some of the KPIs. The insight reporting tool that we have access to, we're currently looking into the functionality of that and the development of that to reduce any manual interventions that we're having to do. And this is really, now that we're opening this up to the customer journey and the statutory KPIs, obviously we're now looking wider than just our performance. So what we really need to be able to do in the future is look at, say, employers, for example, and if we're noticing any systemic issues with particular employers, obviously we can then intervene and have those conversations and put the training in place. So that's part of the extra development piece that's happening in addition. And the final comment I just wanted to make on the paper was under the IDRP section. I just wanted to say some additional words about the refusal to pay the 50% widow's pension. Kind of a bit conscious that maybe it reads maybe a little bit hard in terms of, well, why would we do that? So I just wanted to kind of clarify that for this particular case, it was in relation to a post-retirement marriage. So the regulations are based on when a member retires, and then obviously in this particular case, which the marriage was after that point in time. So the service can only be based on 5th of April 1978, whereas obviously for most cases it is a 50% pension that we would award. And unfortunately, in this particular case, I think some general information had been read and understood to be correct. So that's where that dispute came into play there. But apart from that, that's all I wanted to say what was in the report, but I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
May I just clarify one thing on the KPIs? You referred to industry norms or standards. Do I take it that you have actually been beating yourself up to achieve significantly faster turnarounds than is the norm?
Yes, so from the information that I've seen from the colleagues that have been working on this, I think we've compared ourselves to approximately 10, 12 other funds. And their actual KPI target, the majority of them are looking at 15 days for that particular target. And obviously ours are 5. We've decided to go somewhere in between at 10 and see how we go. But I would probably agree with that comment that we've been particularly hard on ourselves on that particular one.
Thank you.
Michelle,
Val, if I may, and then...
can I just ask a question on your KPIs? I did wonder if that was the case, whether they were actually too tough. And I was wondering if you actually checked on those particular ones. Did you actually, that particular 1 or 2, did you actually check on any of the others to see whether you're sort of out of kilter with, sort of other funds?
We did, yes. And actually, all of our KPIs are tighter, it appears, than other funds, the ones that we've checked against. What I would probably say at this point in time, that while we're meeting those KPIs, our main concern was to focus on, obviously we've got some red areas, and actually retirement from active service is one of our really key KPIs. Obviously people are dependent on money and continuity of payment and that type of thing. So we focused there originally. I know Corey has been looking at the KPIs generally as part of his administration strategy. I haven't looked any further at that yet. But yes, we have looked at all of them, but I believe at this point of time, that is the one where the pressure is. But Mark, you might want to make an additional comment.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we've obviously been green across all of these KPIs over time. We've lost a few members of a particular team, which deals with some of the most time sensitive ones, i.e. retirements and estimates as well. And it's only when they've gone and we've got new team leaders in place that we've realized some of the resultant actions because of the tightness of that particular KPI. And that's why Michelle mentioned that that's that particular drive for changing it, because I don't think it's achievable unless that sometimes comes into play. Particularly when you've got a less experienced team beneath them. If everybody's really experienced and doing things right first time, you haven't got a problem. But as soon as you put some inexperience in the team, then you inevitably will have cases going back for redoing. The other thing I would say is that we also measure internally how quickly we can get things into our workflow process. So if you can imagine something comes into the office, and we need to work out what it is and then appropriately task it up. And we have an incredibly tight target of doing that within as far as possible the same day. But it does mean the actual recording of the start point of our process cannot be until it's properly logged. And so I do want to allow, for sometimes it won't be the same day. So there is a tiny bit of lead time as well, which is on top of these. So that's why I'm actually quite happier for them to be tighter than the industry standard. Reality is we'll propose some new KPIs and we'll see how we go with those and what our success is against those measures.
Mark, that seems really pragmatic. I'm supportive of that if the rest of the board is.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested, as I always probably would be in almost any situation where you're managing different groups, as to why some of our member funds have left the overall fund, and of course there could be many reasons, including they think it will be managed better elsewhere. I don't know, but first question is, do you analyze why people are leaving? Do they give you their reasons? Do you find out why? And second of all, in the context of KPIs, is it because we're not doing something that they think that we should be doing or achieving particular targets? That's a sort of very general question, but
yeah, no. So in terms of employers leaving the fund, what we tend to see with these are short-term contracts that are let out. So quite often the seeding employer will let out certain contracts and they will have a short-term life on them, potentially 3 years or something like that. And then when those contracts come to the end, they cease out of funds. I'm not aware of particularly any listed here that have left because of any kind of dissatisfaction or anything like that, but I can find out a bit more detail and circulate these particular cases. But generally it tends to be that the natural course of a contract coming to an end and not particularly related to performance or anything like that, or anything that we've done.
If I may Chair, there are a number of legacy employers where actually the funding levels means this is a good time to exit. So there's a very small number of employers that have been around for many, many, many years and have perhaps been in deficit for many years, have wanted to exit, but have effectively been trapped within the pension fund. And so now is an opportunity when they can exit. So there have been a number of conversations, but you're talking about I mean, there may be actually one within this list here that actually falls within that category, but there are a few discussions like that. So that's another factor. It's not dissatisfaction with the scheme. It's simply how much the local government pension scheme costs when you don't have to provide it to your staff.
Yeah, thank you. This may well come up later because there's one employer that's left this. I think it's reported later on, and I think it's in this report, that's left with quite a substantial surplus, and it's not going to be taking that surplus with it. We're holding it back or deferring it or paying it over a longer period of time. And I can see how people might be, or employers might be trapped if they've got a deficit and they've got to cover that. So they would be in the scheme. But I mean, it's about the valuations, isn't it? And you know, what they, for example, whatever discount rates are applied at a given point in time that would possibly take them into the the position where they can leave the scheme.
Yes, I mean, we did introduce at the last valuation for certain employees a funding corridor, and so if they're within that corridor, then we're fine. It does mean we introduced it initially because it was a way of not being subject to that. With a cessation, you do a calculation at a set date, and depending on what your position is, that is either your surplus or your deficit. And it's the one time really we used to do that. And so what we changed that approach to more of a probability based approach, in the same way as we set contributions now. And that introduced this corridor, and it meant as long as people were within that, we were fine, and we wouldn't ask for a deficit and we wouldn't pay a surplus. And so in some cases that's now applied to the surplus position. So it's only anything outside of that corridor that we pay. But it also gave reassurance to those employers that they weren't just simply subject to the market conditions on the day they exited. It's fairer to those employers as well. So that's kind of was a mitigation about against the the big swings you can have on a single within a few days as you were trying to decide whether you wanted to exit the fund. But yeah, certainly my final comment would be is the assessment of what you pay of a surplus. So the actuary works out a surplus. What you pay is a multifactorial decision. We look at all sorts of things, including the risk and reward between the parties to the contract, what contributions have been put in, what legacy assets were transferred, and who's contributed towards that surplus building up, all those sorts of things.
One last point following up on that, which has been in my mind. There are 350 active employers. We're not vulnerable to any of the larger ones having big surpluses, pulling out and transferring. I mean, I assume that you have to operate the fund in a way that you are not vulnerable.
They can't pull out because they're scheduled bodies, i.e. local authorities in the main, and they therefore have to legally provide access to the LGPS.
Yeah, I was particularly pleased by the development of the customer journey KPIs, because from what I see, the pension service do a good job, but often are hampered by employers not providing the right information. I know that you follow up on late payment of contributions, but this is a good step. Sort of related to that, how I'm aware that you get most employers send across like monthly data. Have you got many still who only provide annual data? Because that could be a problem.
At the absolute default, and what will be reflected in the administration strategy as well, is that employers do use iConnect as the way to transfer data over to us. Any employers really that aren't doing that will be the exception to the rule, and they would need to have a very good reason why they can't do. I'm not sure there was one employer that I was aware of that does fit into this category. but I'm not sure whether that's been resolved. So I can circulate something after the meeting, but the majority I can absolutely confirm are using iConnect because it's the simplest way that we can receive that information on a monthly basis. But just to confirm, all the information is on a monthly basis. It's just the iConnect system that is the issue in that particular case.
Can I just also follow up on the new customer journey KPIs? I just really wonder whereabouts in the process you are. You know, sort of have you got draft targets in place at the moment? You know, sort of draft measurements system in place, and really, I suppose, going back to what I mentioned earlier, I suppose these KPIs need to be sort of stretching, but actually not absolutely impossible to achieve. And I just wonder how you're going to get that sort of balance.
Yep, so absolutely. So effectively, the administration team under the operations side tested 3 of these areas originally and have been continuing to kind of develop the testing around that and taking that wider. What I should be able to provide at a future meeting is how that testing is going on the other areas as well, and if they've identified obviously any significant pitfalls or anything like that. The information is actually due to come to me early next week. So once obviously I'm in receipt of all that information, we can see where we are and how it's all looking. The one thing I would say is obviously, I think we've probably mentioned before, because we're encompassing all angles with the employer and even the member. I mean, we may even have members that are not sending claim forms back quick enough and that type of thing. It probably will look or could look quite bad to start with, because obviously we then need to do that fine level analysis of actually what's going wrong where and address any of those issues. So the development side, really, I think the high level KPIs are literally against the statutory targets. Has the statutory target been met, yes or no? I think where the information behind that and the development will come in as time goes on, hopefully we'll then be able to say, right, this one is looking particularly bad, but we can tell it's because so many of these forms came in late and that type of thing. So all part of the development process. And I think we are quite ahead of the curve in terms of trying to do this across funds from when we've spoken to kind of other funds as well. So definitely a development piece, but all moving in the right direction at the moment. And hopefully as time goes on, more information will be brought to you.
Thank you, Michelle. I really look forward to seeing how it all pans out.
I'm going back to where I was on the question I asked before. I found it is part of this report. Forgive me. It's the Serco company that left. I just wanted to ask, what's the likelihood of an appeal against that decision? There was a funding surplus of 11 million or something of that order. It's been determined that it should remain in the scheme, but they have a right to appeal. Would you expect them to do so? Is it a problem if they do so?
Well, it's not a problem because it's a legal right they have. So we have no, yeah. So it goes through the internal disputes resolution procedure. So in terms of the who makes the decision in the first instance, I have removed myself from that process in order that I can hear any stage 1 disputes. I think generally what we're seeing, we certainly haven't had appeals where the risk and reward was not with the contractor, and therefore they can logically see why they haven't been awarded the surplus. Where the risk and reward is to some extent with the contractor, then I think they do expect something to come back, but not necessarily the whole amount, because the regulations make it quite clear that the amount that can be given back can be 0, or so an amount between 0 and the surplus. So we never know. I mean, there's no, we've not heard anything indicating that there is going to be appeal, but there's obviously a window of opportunity. And even if they missed a window of opportunity on the internal process, ultimately the regulator sits at the end of this process and can take a decision to, to hear something which the internal process is not prepared to allow to hear. So we will see.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a time limit for the appeal?
Yes, there is. It's a couple of months, a few months with us, isn't it? Is it 6 months? Sorry. We will confirm to the committee precisely what it is. Sorry, it's just slipped my mind as what the various deadlines are. But there's a time limit for the stage 1 and then for the follow-on stage 2. But then the regulator has quite a much lengthier timescale they're prepared to allow appeals,
right,
which runs well beyond what ours does. So I do take the attitude sometimes that we're better off, even though they're out of time in terms of our internal process. There is sometimes still merit in actually hearing it internally, so we can actually set out very clearly what the rationale for a decision has been, and then that may also result in it not going further.
Understood. Thank you. So it will be some while before that particular item is finally closed.
Well, I don't look at it that way at all. We've made a decision, and following on from that, like every time we award a benefit, there can be an appeal. So we complete the process, but then there is always the possibility of something being appealed down the line. But
Yeah.
That's just a reality of the scheme.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Then thank you very much. Thank you, Michelle, for your usual excellent report, which we have noted. So to move on, there is the annual business plan update. Can I ask you, Mark, to present this?
Thank you, Chair. I will concentrate in presenting on the table showing a RAG status of the various items, which is on page 60, top of page 60, and just work my way down. I'm mainly concentrating on the things that have changed or have updates on. So just in terms of the procurements at the top, obviously I believe already confirmed that we have successfully re-procured for the software contract, and Hayward are the preferred supplier, and we're just finalising the documentation on that. The start date of that revised contract isn't actually until late next year. So there's, but we hope to conclude that probably in the next month. The other 3 main procurements we're doing, so benefits, governance, actuarial, and legal, are all going to plan and are all out to procurement. And in one case, we've got some responses back for us to score and assess. Moving down, I would flag even whilst green, the GMP rectification at 3.10. You'll note in the body of the report there is some positive progress stated on that particular activity. It's one that we've reprofiled over time, because it did have we had more ability to move that around to suit other priorities, but we are aiming to try to bring that to a conclusion this financial year, so it's done and dusted. The McLeod remedy has been changed to amber. That's primarily because of some very, very late guidance that came out and consultation response from government around a month before it went live. The high level message from me, but Michelle will pick up on this later, is that we are doing business as usual using the new underpin rules. But the remedy itself will be not be looked at for cases already awarded until we get some information from centrally early next year. But Michelle, as I say, will go into later in detail in the governance report. The unprocessed leavers 3.13, you've seen again some really positive progress outlined in the report. So the first time you've seen some really significant decreases in numbers. Obviously, McLeod is throwing a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of what might happen now. In October, though, we were pretty much static on, so it's been dropping every month. October was pretty much static. I believe the total numbers went up ever so slightly, but considering everything that was going on around McLeod at the time, I am actually quite pleased with that as a result. So that is positive progress there. The development of the asset pool had changed to amber. In public session, what I can say is that purely related to the non-listed program, which I'll go into some detail in the access report later. So we'll pick up the rationale for that there. And then finally, moving down to the bottom of that table, you'll see a couple of new activities. The very bottom one is probably something we could have had in before, which is the investment consultancy contract. There is a extension point next year, or extension opportunity next year. And so we've just put that into the programme of activity. And then EDI, there's been some, you've probably seen if you do see emails from SAB and the like, there's some planned activity that we've put in there. I think Michelle will also pick up on that in her governance report as well. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. And thank you. This RAG table is very useful. Are there any questions for Mark? Oh.
Okay. Mark, can I just ask about the code of practice, which is supposed to be, you've been waiting for it to come in for probably almost since about 2022 or something like that. I just wonder, is there a good feeling about it actually coming into effect, early 2024? Or I suppose really where I'm getting at is we haven't had a review of the effectiveness of the board since 2021. And, occasionally I have mentioned this. And I just really wonder how much longer we can wait to have an effectiveness of review, for the good governance review to be actually published.
So there are two, sorry, the code of practice and obviously the good governance are two completely separate projects. Yeah. Michelle, we were just touching, we had the exchange around effectiveness review the other day. Did you want to pick up on your plans on that anyway, irrespective of when the code of practice and the good governance review comes through? I mean, they have been delayed beyond all expectation, and we've been promised certainly the code of practice on numerous occasions, like imminently. I think the good governance is kind of taking a different path, which is so there's a working group under, or subgroup under SAB that I was hearing from representatives from the other just early this week, actually, in terms of what they're doing there. But effectiveness review, sorry, Michelle.
Yeah, so on both of those aspects, so in terms of the code of practice, as you probably remember, it was one of those items that has been on the agenda plans forever and a day, and I just kept kind of pushing them back to the point where it's not on there now because I'm waiting for something obviously solid to come through. As we say, the last we heard, it is due to come out early next year. However, we have kind of heard these revised timescales before. So we're effectively waiting on our governance advisors to let us know exactly what the plan is with that. And once that does come out, they're going to be putting on some additional training and things with that as well. And obviously what that also impacted was the policy update on the breaches of the law as well. So we've obviously done an interim update waiting for that as well. So that will also need to be revisited. In terms of the effectiveness reviews, this is something that has been on my radar for quite some time as well. Again, originally trying to tie it all really nicely with the government and everything that's coming through. Again, getting to the point now where actually, and in the same way as with the breaches policy, we're getting to the point where we can't really wait any longer to do that. So it will be appearing on the agendas plan. We need to get the resourcing right as well internally to make sure that runs effectively, because obviously there's a big piece of work in terms of making sure we're asking the right questions, setting up, if we, you know, use SurveyMonkey in the same way as we have done before and that type of thing. There's also a question, obviously, about an independent review. Obviously, we've had one of those, but a long time ago now. So it's all in the pipeline. A bit of further thought probably needs about the actual practicalities of doing that. But I absolutely agree. We're at the point where we do need to have one. And it does feed into a lot of work that's going on with the pension regulator as well. Effectiveness comes into that as well, and what we're asking our members and how things are going. So absolutely, okay, will be coming up.
It's got to be within the next 6 months, hasn't it? I mean, realistically, it's been a while. So I think you can hold us to that. That is certainly achievable. I mean, one of the things that's obviously been happening is Michelle effectively hasn't had anyone supporting her in terms of a direct report for over a year, I think it is now. So obviously Michelle stepped up when Joe moved across to another role, and we just simply, for various reasons, haven't been able to fulfill that role. So that has been a big. I think we have some applicants now, so we're looking through.
I'm pleased it's both of you. I'm really pleased it's on the agenda, and I'll sit and wait for this space to come up.
Just wanted to pick up on Appendix 2 about the climate action plan. Just noticed that sort of one of the first targets, 2024 is only just around the corner. I just wondered anecdotally how we're doing on the 23% decarbonisation.
We are expecting to be considerably ahead of schedule by a number of years. I mean, we are going to be taking the results to the provisional results to the next investment subcommittee. So that's something certainly to look out for, that paper pack when it comes out. It will obviously be a confidential paper, but we will obviously report the progress publicly. But yeah, I'm expecting to be able to report some really positive progress on that following our passive equity moves. Should hasten to add, obviously, the work we're doing at the moment and the measurements are all with regards to equity. We'll also are looking at what the timeline to expand that into other asset classes is as well. So all of that should be in the investment subcommittee pack, and then we will update the climate action plan with the progress, update the dashboard with the progress, and everything else which is in the public domain.
Yeah, on Appendix 1, it's page 74. I noticed that there isn't, or I don't think there is, the administration expenses on here. There seems to be the management expenses. It's on that page. Although the analysis is actually on page 75, I just wondered what was the reason for the administration expenses not being actually on the summary forecast.
Sorry, they go into the, so we call them management expenses when we go into the high level numbers, but then we show the breakdown of management expenses into various components. Yeah.
See it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mark, there's page 69, third line up from the bottom, the switch of gilts. There's a typo. I believe it should be not on target, but is there any particular reason for it not being on target and not a revised target provided?
I think that will be I believe the move of our gilts, which were being used as collateral within our equity protection program, into effectively into the UBS pooled vehicle, so the passive vehicle. And I think there was just a little bit more time spent in terms of the actual rationale for the decision as to whether to keep them where they were or whether to move them, i.e. looking at things like governance and cost and fees, etc. So it was just a little bit more time taken over the governance of that decision. That's the only reason. But then they were moved from Schroders, as it was, to UBS.
So sorry, are they being moved? Or have-
I think we will confirm I believe they have gone now.
Right, okay.
But when this was obviously drafted some time back, it wasn't meeting the June 2023 target, which was effectively just after we did the revised strategic asset allocation.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank Mark for the report, and we have noted it and can move on to item 7, the potential breaches of law report. Michelle, it's over to you, I believe.
I think you got item 6.
Sorry? Thank you. My apologies. Getting ahead of myself. The governance compliance report. It's still you, Michelle, but thank you.
Thank you. So as you'll see this time around, this report's quite busy with a lot of activity going on, but you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go into all the details, areas in much detail, but I will just pick up on the key projects that we've got going on and make an additional couple of comments. So really within the report, the first topic in there is the pension dashboards. So really just wanted to make a few comments about how that's developing and where we are with that. Obviously, earlier in the year, the position was completely different, and the government had put a whole project reset, and we were waiting to see the outcome of that. So what we do know at the moment now is that the connection deadline of the 31st of October 2026 has been set in regulation. What the change has been is the approach in terms of the connection guidance. So that now we're waiting on DWP and MAPS to give us our specific staging date that we obviously need to work to, but this is not going to be set in regulation. However, as detailed in the report, the pension regulator has still set very clear expectations around the staging guidance and has made it very clear that we must have regard to the guidance and no decisions are to be made without prior review of that. And actually they would deem that to be a breach of the law if we didn't have regard to that guidance. So this kind of overall strategy has changed slightly, but the key message really is until that guidance has been published, we're still obviously not able to fully commit to an action plan until we know when our connection time will be. Since we last met as well, we had the payroll administration software procurement happening. Now that that's concluded, that helps with a bit of the planning in terms of we absolutely now know we've got no kind of justification for any delays or anything like that because the procurement has now concluded. What we can start to look at now is the ISP requirements, see what options we've got there, see kind of the controls over the matching criteria. We can start to maybe have a look at that and mapping that. And then as a result of that, we can start to think about any the policy in place that needs to go into play as well in terms of what we agree with that. Following on from that, so there's been quite a bit of work done and the information we know about what we should be providing and information, for example, what we should be signposting and what must be returned straight away and that type of thing. By contrast, what we also need to now start thinking about is the GDPR implications for actually members that we don't hold any records for, or we receive partial matches on. So we need to, when we're having these discussions on the ISP, we need to make sure that actually what happens if somebody comes through to us and we can't find any records for those members. The clear instruction on that is the information needs to be deleted immediately. So we need to make sure that we've got assurance that that functionality is been enabled. Again, with people that we're getting partial matches on, we need to make contact within 30 days to try and establish whether we think that this person's got any benefits with us. If they have, fine. If not, again, it needs to be deleted immediately. So we need to kind of now start thinking a bit wider about some of the controls that we need to make sure that the ISP provider has in place, and asking the right kind of questions as well. And just a general comment about, obviously we've spoken before and brought to you the data improvement plan. So everything that we've been doing to date in terms of data improvement, we've continued to do that and keep on that path. So we're in quite a good position from that point of view in terms of the continual improvement of our data. So that's kind of where we are with dashboards at the moment. The most pressing issue internally at the moment, as Mark has mentioned earlier, and we've mentioned for the last few meetings, is obviously McLeod. The main issue with this has been the very quick succession of everything kind of happening right at the last minute after it's obviously been going on for some time. So just to put this into kind of context, the government published a response to the consultation on the 8th of September. The regulations were then published on the 11th of September, and the regulations came into force on the 1st of October. So it was a particularly narrow kind of period that we had all this information kind of coming through. Luckily, in the main, all the proposals in the consultation were implemented, which meant that we were able to act as in the way that we wanted to, and there were no surprises there. So in terms of where we are now, as Mark mentioned earlier, the key thing that we're waiting on is the guidance. So we're waiting on the statutory guidance in the first instance, and then there will be a secondary set of guidance that will be able to look at some general administration and the kind of the lesser urgent priorities. So we have now received, so the Scheme Advisory Board on behalf of DLUC have now issued on the 12th of October the draft prioritisation guidance. So they've done this ahead of the release, which is due to be early next year, just really to give funds the courtesy of having a look early and making sure that we're familiar with everything that's in there, so we can start to get our heads around that now and make sure that we can start coming up with a plan that kind of fits in with that guidance. So really where we are now, just to put this into context for the Cambridgeshire Pension Fund specifically, so we have just over 18,000 members in scope, which roughly equates to about 17% for this application of the remedy. Slight caveat on that number, as in this is everything that we know to date, but where we have some potential increase on numbers will be where members are holding benefits in either public service funds, which will be harder for us to establish, or other local government pension schemes, funds where they're not using the National Insurance database and things like that. So again, linking back to the guidance, we believe, I haven't had a chance to fully review it yet, but we believe that that collecting of information about other funds and particularly other schemes will be in that prioritisation guidance as well, so that we can accurately look at who is in scope and what we need to do with those. So internally, the good news is from the 1st of October, we were compliant with applying the regulations, so we were compliant in that respect, and we've encountered actually very few issues since we've gone live on the system with with doing that. There have been some minor issues that we have put in some manual workarounds just at this point in time until they're resolved, mainly to ensure that there's obviously no detriment to the members, but nothing that's caused us any significant concern or any, much additional work. So that's all been quite positive from that point of view. And really, I suppose the last update on McLeod, and probably the important one, is the communication side of this for our members. So what we have got now, we've got the landing page for the pension service website. And what we're looking at is the communications at the moment for the disclosure requirements. So the disclosure requirements effectively need us to publish electronically the information regarding McLeod. So what we will do is obviously make sure that within the 3-month limit, we can publish that information to member self-service records. What we will be doing in addition is any members that we've got email addresses for, we will also email those individuals and let them know that the information's on member self-service. Anyone that is opted out, we will write to them. And then anybody that we've not got an email address for, we've got other methods of communication. So we're going to utilise our employers to let obviously other active members know that the information's out there. We've obviously already got the website. We've got pensioner newsletters that are going out in January, and we'll let them know there. But really the additional flagging is really just us taking that extra step to make sure that we're reaching out to as many people as possible. And as we've kind of said before, so the reality is obviously we've kind of got as far as we can at the moment. The guidance will help us kind of look at the remedial work that needs to be done. But the reality is that most will not see an increase in benefits because the career average scheme is likely to be higher than they would have built in the final salary scheme either. But for obviously the purpose of what we're doing, I think the key message is we're compliant in everything that we've done and been asked to do, and obviously we're on track with the communications as well, which is probably the messages where we are now. And obviously as the guidance comes out, we'll keep you updated of what that guidance is and how we're tackling those cases as well. So just a couple of other things I just wanted to mention in this report. The gender pay gap. Obviously, we've seen that for the last couple of meetings coming in, and just really wanted to link that back to, as Mark said, in the business plan with the EDI activity that we've put in there. So we are obviously seeing quite a strong push to kind of look into EDI and practices and that type of thing, especially coming through from the pension regulator. So when I start to look at that and develop the action plan, I'll obviously be looking at gender pay gap as well and seeing actually where any crossovers are between the two. So effectively, mainly communications, where we can be kind of mindful of our communications and making sure that we're getting out to as many people as we can in the correct way. We've obviously already done quite a lot of work on communications already, making sure things are accessible and that type of thing. But we'll continue to work in this area to make sure that we are as accessible to everybody as possible. And the final comment I just wanted to make is just to draw your attention to the policy and strategy review section. Obviously, this is a new section we've put in following the change in review process with the pension committee. So the annual reviews have been undertaken on the governance policy and compliance statement, and just to really note the investment strategy statement review there as well, just for oversight and assurance purposes, just so that you're aware of those. But apart from that, that's all I wanted to say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. There's a lot of detail in there. Councillor Steve.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, congratulations or well done to Michelle and Mark and the team on dealing with an extraordinarily complex set of affairs. I'm talking about McLeod. I want to ask a question, and Mr. Chairman, you will tell me whether this question is out of order because it really does relate to the investment committee that deals with these things. But has somebody done a financial impact assessment of what it might mean? And you'd say that there's 18,000 individual members that may be affected. Some may not be and receive additional benefits, but presumably many will. What sort of value might this impact on the funds itself? But I don't know. Is it an out of order question?
No, not at all. It's something that we asked our actuary some time back, and the number was in the low thousands, building up over the years, obviously, but it was completely immaterial to the fund, and therefore immaterial to the scheme employees as well. Should say we will obviously start to see when we move into the remedy stage what the numbers actually are, and based on that we will then probably re-ask that question of the actuary. But you know, so if that doesn't match up with what our expectations are, we will clearly need to do another piece of work around that. But we've certainly got it on the agenda.
The question was absolutely fine, by the way. It was a matter that had previously been reported to the board, I believe. So no problems with that question. Val, I think you had a question, did you? No. Mary?
Yeah, I noticed in the section on what the SAB are doing, there seemed to be a lot of work on sort of standardising KPIs. Just what are your comments on that? So, I mean, from my point of view, it's a good thing that you're comparing apples with apples.
Yeah, so they are looking at standardising KPIs in conjunction with SIPVA in terms of the annual report. So those KPIs for that particular purpose are not compulsory. So they're trying to kind of streamline some general guidance for that particular purpose. So why we will obviously, we're fed into that process already anyway, in regards to thoughts on what they've come up with so far. But actually the way that we're operating at the moment is quite differently in terms of we're kind of going further than that in terms of our customer service ones as well. So the two things don't quite marry up because you're talking about two different things. But for the ones that are looking at administration, again, I think their KPIs are probably a bit more relaxed than we operate to at the moment. But of course, when we do look at our SIPVA reporting and for the annual report, we obviously will look at that guidance that's due to come out next year officially. And we will work to that as well for that particular purpose. So yeah, it's a good piece of work that they've done in terms of consistency for the annual report purpose that they're working on.
You have another question? Yeah.
Right. I just want the gender pensions gap report. To me, it's quite a complicated area because pensions is obviously your pension is based upon your underlying employment, and the way I see it, the issue is with the employment. But what can pensions do to, if there is a gender gap, to sort of lessen that gap? Is it I presume options to like buy service, etc.?
Yeah, so when this report first came out, we asked our governance advisors the absolute same question, because as you rightly say, really the pension element is just a result of everything that's happened, you know, through an employment life cycle. And what we were told at the time, and obviously this is a developing area, was really the focus for pension funds is more to do with the communications, to make sure that for specific groups of people that we are pitching our communications correctly in a manner that people are understanding and understanding what implications that could have as well. So for example, working part-time, that type of thing obviously lends itself to a particular group of people, or has done in the past. So it's more about, actually, we can't change the regulations or how we operate because the rules are the rules. It's more about, are we effectively getting key messages across to all types of groups of people with different scenarios, that actually when they come to retirement, there's no shocks, or there's no, oh, I wish I'd have known I could have paid AVCs, or I wish I'd have known I could have done this, or, and you know, or that would have been the implication, and that type of thing. So in line with EDI as well, in terms of, I think there'll be the focus really on communications to make sure that we're being as clear as we can be on life choices, really, about if you choose to do this, just please bear in mind, you know, and that type of angle is what I believe will be the main focus for us. And as all this extra guidance come out from Scheme Advisory as board, we'll obviously keep a close eye on that and see if anything else comes into that. So it'll be interesting to see how it all pans out and what we can do and where we go with it. Yeah.
Thank you. And Michelle, you are about to get an assistant to work with you on all of this, aren't you?
Hopefully. So the job has been advertised, I think, twice before with no success, and then we had a bit of a delay. So we've got some interviews, and I will update you after that as to how they went, I suppose is all I can say.
Well, I mean, this is a very comprehensive report, and I mean, sorry, I'm just amazed at the complexity of some of this stuff that you have to deal with, and you fill me with confidence you're on top of it. So thank you. Thank you very much. We've been asked to note this report. I think we've fairly comprehensively done that. And Michelle, you don't get a break. You are next on the potential breaches of the law. If you could update us briefly on this.
Yes, thank you. So really this item links directly back to what we spoke about earlier with the internal audit report and the control objective 7. And to ensure we've got appropriate procedures in place to identify and report breaches of the law. So as we already know, we had a policy in place for the reporting side of the breaches that was updated not so long ago. But this came about really from initial audit comment about, well, how do you know what to report? What controls have you got in place from that point of view, which is what I think for this particular audit. I know it's taken a different approach, but from an assurance point of view, from my point of view, I found it actually quite useful because obviously some of those assurance controls are in my area in terms of risk and breaches. So what I've tried to do is split the report so it's not a lot of regulations just kind of thrown at everybody. So section 3 is the key detail of the report, which really looks at the compliance in terms of the Pensions Act and Pension Regulator Code of Practice. And for every requirement in there, what we've tried to do is identify the associated controls and measures, and then obviously if there's any additional oversight in there as well, as in what comes to the board and committee as well. And then what we've also done in the appendices, we've listed the LGPS regulations and obviously any other requirements that we felt were appropriate in there as well. So what I would probably say about this report is it really pulls together all the work I feel that is actually undertaken already. It's one of those that we know we do it, it's done on a daily basis, and these things are obviously kept in check. But the compliance piece just really can be that assurance if we're asked. So it's nice to obviously bring this to you to review, and then in the same way, if the pension regulator asked us tomorrow, well, how do you make sure that you're not breaching this area? We've obviously got something documented that we can refer to now. What I would probably say is this report is coming to you first to have a look at, to see if you've got any further suggestions or any comments, and it's due to go to the pension committee in December. Section 3.9 obviously talks about the potential consequences, which is really important as well, and really links back into the breaches of the law policy as well, to tie those two things together. And further down the line, what I will be looking to do is try and cross-reference this particular document and the controls in here from a regulatory point of view against the risk register controls as well, to try and kind of tie those two pieces of work in. But that's all I really wanted to say about the content and the kind of the direction of this particular report. But I'm obviously happy to take any questions, either of the content that's there or any further recommendations of anything we can do.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay. Thanks, Michelle. I was very pleased to hear that you mentioned about you know, taking forward some of these the controls that are in place in this report through to the risk register. So that was one of my questions. So that's ticked that one off. The you have mentioned a quality assurance officer. Where does this particular person sort of sit in the structure, and what their role is? I suppose where I'm sort of coming from, quality assurance, does that fit in with the 3 lines of defence model, which has you know, obviously quality, possibly the second line of defence? I just wouldn't, you know, I'm just sort of thinking ahead of something like that. I just wondered, can you say where they fit in?
Yep, so the quality assurance officer sits under the operations team, and their role effectively is to ensure that all our processes and documentation is kept up to date, and obviously support from other teams such as my team as well, to make sure that the appropriate guidance is given. And then as an addition to that as well, we also have a quality assurance board that sits in my team. So it's kind of, that one's more kind of a cross-purpose board, where we have representatives from different areas on that one. And the quality assurance officer also attends that. So any issues that are identified either in a specific team or something that may impact further or wider than that, get discussed at that particular board, and then obviously consistent resolutions come out of that board, and it's documented so that if a decision's made and, you know, a bit further down the line, oh, why did we say that? There's obviously some narrative to as to why that decision process was taken and things like that. So that's kind of how the quality assurance works. I don't know if that's...
Okay. Does the quality assurance officer actually produce reports, the board?
Not in terms of these reports, but the quality assurance officer is responsible for the KPIs and the reporting behind the scenes for those.
And checking that they're all okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think the so the quality assurance board is something that I put in place because I wanted to make sure that when things change in the environment, that they're reflected within our processes. And so the role of that is it's a horizon scan. So we look at internally our own complaints, disputes, ombudsman decisions, but also anything that's come out. And actually, so our legal advisors provide us with an update that goes into that as well, and what's changed. So, and then we also look at what's come out centrally in terms of local government employers and the advice on process changes and things like that. So all of that gets fed in, and we then look at what we need to change. And the quality assurance officer also is ultimately responsible for making sure the processes are right. And so they do feed into that board to talk about the progress on updates, for example, and how they've gone about it. We've also got a couple of regulation officers that sit under Michelle, who get at a very, very technical level, get involved in sign off of those processes as well. So that's kind of how that robustness works. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Sorry, Chair, I was just looking at my notes. No, I don't have any more questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Oh, I do have a question. I was trying to find a note. So it probably relates to this report, but maybe back to the previous report on the governance. There's so how do you resolve? Because I noticed the boycotts and divestments bill. So to comply with law, how does that work? Where, let's say, the UN has a directive or something, but our own UK law differs to that. How can we comply with the law? Who ultimately do we take the word of?
I mean, the advice comes down from central government in terms of in that area, and that's what we follow. But I mean, to be very clear, I mean, there's the fund, as you know, has a policy of not divesting from any sector or region, and the only time we would is we were effectively instructed to do so. Which, you know, so obviously with the Russian invasion, all of those assets were effectively ultimately written down to zero, anything that was held. But it's very, very rare, obviously, that kind of thing happens. But we would take advice from central government on that.
Okay, thank you very much. We've been asked to note this report, and I believe we've done that. So thank you very much. The next item is the cash management strategy. Mark, I think that one's for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, I'll be very brief on this one because I think this is a really quite a straightforward strategy, and you can see from the table in section 2, which sets out the changes made. They are quite light. Obviously, this was a strategy developed originally in the old LGSS days, so we've had to change it for that. And there's been a change of bank account within Cambridgeshire as well. And beyond that, just a few other formatting issues. The cash management strategy really reflects the fact that the majority of our money coming in comes from contributions which arrive around about by the 19th of the month following month of deduction, and the biggest money going out we have is the pension and payroll, and so we retain those funds for a period and then pay the pension and payroll, and then we can obviously invest anything that's effectively surplus, making sure we have enough money for transactions. And some of them, we can have quite a few large pension or lump sum payments in a very short space of time. So these numbers can be quite large, as can transfers out. They can easily run into the few hundreds of thousands as a matter of course these days. I won't say any more about the strategy. I think it's quite a straightforward one. It needed a full review because it hadn't been reviewed for some time, hence why it's been brought. But happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Mark. Yes.
Quick one, if I may. I'm probably wrong on this, but people can now take out lump sums at a much earlier stage, can't they, than they used to be able to? I can't remember when the law changed on that. So has that affected cash management? In other words, they can start taking out at age 55, I think, and also there's a commutation, I think, that they can even start taking it out once they've started drawing. So it was quite different at the time that legislation was introduced.
Yeah, I mean, we can't. I guess at an individual member level, the time over which benefits might be payable is much broader than it used to be, voluntarily, to be clear. So obviously, you've got redundancy, efficiency, ill health, which so redundancy and efficiency, the age is obviously 55 as well. Ill health can be at any point. So, but yes, the change to enable anyone to voluntarily retire and receive benefits from age 55, I think that doesn't pose much of a problem for us. It probably poses more of a problem for scheme employers, actually, who don't know now when their staff will actually leave and retire. We can control that. We use effectively some treasury software to manage our cash management, and I think the fact is that whilst I said that if you add a number of retirement lump sums together, it can come to a very big number. That's all perfectly manageable in terms of the fund as a whole. When you look at the amounts that come in through employer contributions, for example, the other thing I didn't mention, we also get distributions obviously back from investments where they're not automatically invested. So particularly in the alternative space like private equity. So we do get distributions back, and it also helps to keep the cash balances at the right level. But I don't see what you just described as being a problem.
Yeah, that was one aspect, and because the other one was, and it's probably taken effect now, which was the impact of COVID and the additional 500,000 people or 1 million people, whatever it is, retired much earlier than they would have otherwise expected. So I don't know whether that's impacted on your cash flows and cash management.
And I mean, anecdotally, there was a feeling that we were getting more deferreds into payment than we expected. So, people were using the ability to access deferred pension to effectively fund their retirement during, the COVID period earlier than they expected. But I think this is has to be looked at in the context of the fund is maturing. Which means that the numbers of pensioner and deferred members we have relative to active is all forever increasing, and we will have more and more deferred pensions being brought into payment anyway, because there's more and more people leave, have left early over time, and they will all eventually reach retirement age when we have to pay something out, unless they go, transfer them to another fund. So anecdotally, I think that we did have higher numbers. It will take a number of years to see whether that's actually a sustained increase, and how that relates, as I say, to our natural increase we would expect anyway through deferred membership. Something we've got an eye on, but again, it's not particularly worrying from a cash management perspective. The biggest things that have impacted us on that front, and which is effectively meaning we're probably going to be doing annual reviews of the cash flow position in terms of what the projected position is inflation. So a 10% uplift on benefits is absolutely huge. Follow it up again this year with what I think is 6.9%. It will be the following year. That's something which we need to pay very careful attention to.
Thank you. Just on item 6.2, when you talk about NatWest Bank, and there's 3 accounts. Receivable, payroll, and payables. Then there's a last paragraph that says that at the close of business each day, any surplus shortfall on the above accounts are swept into the overarching interest-bearing liquidity account to ensure the residual balance of 10,000 on each. Is that liquidity account the interest? That's the interest-bearing one, and is this on the picture? Is that the account? I'm just trying to understand the sentence, really. Yeah. Okay.
Believe so. We can confirm.
No, call it the NatWest surplus and deficit cash, and I was just wondering if that's the same as the liquidity account, which is the interest bearing, and the 10,000 residual balance. Does that mean there's 10,000 left in each of the receivable, the payable, and the accounts every night. Is that what it means?
I've not got the microphone on. I mean, ultimately, all of that is only, that's almost like temporary, because what we want to do is get money into the custodian's account, because that's where it can then be invested obviously into money markets, but equally it can go, that's then where it goes into our actual investments. So everything locally, it's almost like temporarily to before it gets where we really want it to be.
Okay.
And we try to absolutely minimize the amount that we're retaining locally, because it's not giving us
returns
that we would otherwise get elsewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
This has I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark.
No more questions. I will take it that we have noted the pension fund cash management strategy. Thank you very much, Mark. You should have received by email a copy of the local fund board annual report. It's a late report. As chair, I agreed that we should take it, particularly since it is being presented to full council in December, and in order to afford the board opportunity to review it before it is presented. I'll now ask Daniel to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Those of you who have been on the board for a while will be familiar with the annual report that we produce annually. This goes to full council and reports the activities of the board for the year. I won't do a huge introduction, but I will just note that we do need to make a slight amendment to Val's training record following feedback, which we'll do in time for full council. Happy to take any questions if you have any. No, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. We're being asked to approve that report. And I will take it that lack of questions implies that we have happily approved that. Thank you very much, Daniel. We now have the forward plan to look at. Are there any questions regarding the forward agenda plan? I assume April will be filled in somewhat more as time progresses.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll obviously start thinking about beyond that as well. But yeah.
If there are no questions about the forward agenda plan, we'll take that as noted. We will now move to items for which it is necessary to exclude the press and public. So I will ask you to agree to resolve that the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the report contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and that it would not be in the public interest for this information to be disclosed in discussion, as it contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Do you so agree? As this is the final public item on the agenda, I would like to express my thanks to those members of the public